Hello everyone, my name is Luz and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a brief first level review on how to make your very first Doom level. The client we'll be using is Doom Builder 2. This is version 2.1.3.10. This is actually available at a custom downloadable website. I'll go ahead and link that in the description for you to use if you choose to do so. The first thing you're going to want to do whenever you create a Doom map of any sort of kind is you're going to want to go ahead and click on New Map. If that's not obvious enough. However, what you're going to want to do, this part's kind of important. For your first kind of Doom maps, I'd always recommend doing Doom 2 in the game configuration, as these ones right here are a little bit more difficult to master. And personally, I'm not super familiar with all of these. However, we're just going to go ahead and select Doom 2 for this. So for the map name, seeing as we're only going to be making one map, this isn't super critical right now, so we'll just leave it as map 01. But what we're also going to go ahead and do, and this is really important, is that we will choose add a resource. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to give us a means for adding a sort of texture resource pack that we can grab textures from, certain sprites, certain entities, basically anything we're wanting to be putting on our map. All of this will make sense later and you'll see what I'm talking about. So what we're going to want to go ahead and do is we're going to do add a resource. So this will bring up this screen. So what we're going to do these resources from, you could do it from a directory, PK3, or a WAD. And I'm going to be using a WAD file, as most simple Doom Builder requirements will just only need a WAD. And the one we're going to be making it through is Doom 2. So I'm going to go ahead and select Doom 2 here. And then now, since we have Doom 2, we're going to hit OK. And then now you'll see in here that the Doom 2 WAD is now loaded into our resources pack. And once we see this here, we'll go ahead and hit OK. And then now we have our grid view and we should be able to start making our map. So let's go over a couple of different things here kind of at the beginning so that you can understand and follow along a little bit easier. First thing we're going to want to do, so we can make slightly more precise edges and lines if we choose to, is I'd recommend coming down into here in the bottom right corner. So basically what this is saying is that our grid is 32 units wide. What we're going to want to go ahead and change that to, you can go as low as 4. I probably wouldn't recommend going lower than 16 for your first one, as that might be a little bit too much of detail. Even 32, that might be kind of the lowest you'd want to go. For the sake of this tutorial, we'll go ahead and do 16. So so now that we have that changed, we're going to be coming up into here, and we're going to talk about a few of the things here. So the first thing I want to talk about is vertices. Vertices are certain points on a line that you'll be drawing later that you can add a anchor point to, pretty much. If you're kind of familiar with the pen tool inside Photoshop, it's a little bit like that. It just makes editing certain lengths of walls in a different way possible, or if you wanted to add a certain strip of land that could potentially be something on the map, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail later. But these are basically just your anchor points that you can kind of adjust and kind of move from there. So line defs mode is where we actually get down to the editing the lines of walls or lines in between the vertices that we previously created. So in between these previously converted or created, geez, I can't talk today, vertices that we will be creating inside our drawn lines. This line mode can, you can right click it and drag and adjust things, but we'll go more into detail of that later. Right here is the sectors mode. This is if you want to select a portion of a room or an entire room or just a sector. Basically a geometric shape contained by lines. Any sort of polygon that has a closed gap around it of lines defining that polygon is going to be selected with this tool right here. And then right here is brightness mode. We're not going to worry about that too much right now. And this is a make sectors mode. And this is basically if you were to draw lines and it didn't automatically make a sector for you, you could use this, click inside the lines. But like I said, it's kind of hard to visualize that. So let's just get right into it. First thing we're going to go ahead and do here is in the bottom right corner of your keyboard, you're going to hit Control D as in Delta. So basically what this shortcut will do is will bring us into drawing mode. So now you'll see this little white or yellow dot here, and basically what we're doing with this is we can go to anywhere in the grid we so please, and we can start drawing a line to, basically we could just do a line, or we could start making our first room. So let's go ahead in here and make a small little spawn room. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go from this corner to this corner. So that makes a 60, well actually we'll do 80 to, or an 80 length wall here. And then maybe we'll do a 128. And we can do maybe another 80, bring it out here. And maybe we could do a 48, maybe we'll do 64. So you basically just want to drag these lines out here. There's no, nothing else you need to do. You just need to kind of move the mouse around so you find that equal distance. And then we're going to match the one up top that we already did, which is a 128. And then we'll match this one out to be an 80 as well. And then finally, we're going to meet back up with our beginning point that we have drawn here. And then now we have a created sector. So in certain versions of Doom Builder, there is a automatically built-in camera, but for this version specifically, I've noticed that you have to manually add a spectator camera. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to add a spectator camera. So what you're going to want to go ahead and do is click right up in here where it says Things Mode. And once you've clicked in here, you're going to right-click, and now you'll see a giant list of everything you could possibly want to put on the map. There's monsters, there's weapons, there's ammo, anything, any sort of pickup item that you could possibly have, and plus player spawn points will be in this, and basically just entities for decorations, anything that you could want to put on the map. But what we'll do for right now, seeing as we don't know what we want to do with weapons and demons and everything else quite yet, we're going to go ahead and place down our visual camera mode. And so when we come into here, we're going to press W. Basically, W is going to let us kind of get a 3D perspective of what the room we just created is like. These textures are going to be showing up as whatever version of Doom Builder you have. Usually it'll just be like a brown wall. This is a slightly more custom version, but we will be changing these textures later to be something more of our liking rather than just kind of bland box texture. And to move around in this view, instead of WASD as it is to move around the game, it's actually ESDF. So you're basically just shifting over one entire set of keys. So D is to go, or sorry, S is to go to the left, F is to go to the right, D is to go backwards, and E is to go forwards. And then the mouse is obviously to look around. And if you wanted to click on the certain things, you can. You can click by this, and then that will select that wall, for instance. And so I've told the system that I want to select this wall. So if I right click, it'll bring me into the editing screen, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So we've created our first room, and that's great. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're actually going to kind of expand upon this room that we just created. So you really can do anything you would like. This is just kind of me giving some ideas of, potentially what you could create in a sense. There really are no rules to this, as you really could add kind of whatever you want. It's kind of just up to personal opinion. So I'm just going to add a couple of different rooms here that we've already, learn how to do with the drawing mode, so we can kind of have maybe a bit of an idea of how we want to do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a 240. Maybe we'll do a, let's do 125 curve. And we'll do another 240, 125 curve here. Come over a little bit more. So now we'll go ahead and match this 240 so we know we're on track, and then we can add that 128 because we know that was the length of this line right here earlier. So now we'll go ahead and add another 240 onto this, and then now we can go down and do our 125 that we did earlier on this side right here. That's this length. And then now we'll come down, we'll do a 240 line depth length, and then now we'll also bring it down to match that 125, thus ending right there. And it looks like we may be slightly off here. I wonder. Let's go ahead and adjust this. So now this is actually a good example because we can move this vertice that we just created. So now I can kind of come down into here and match this out to be 125. So in order to move a vertice from what I just did, you actually could come down to this vertice point, right click on it, and you can actually adjust it to whatever angle you'd like. So now it's still a 125 length. I've just shifted it over a little bit, changing the angle of that line. So we're going to zoom out by using the mouse wheel. So now we'll go back into our drawing mode, which is Control D, and we'll fix this real quick. Perfect. So now it's created a sector for us that we can kind of have some room to work around in potentially. So in this, we're going to kind of just visualize what we just drew. And as you can see, this is our first little room here coming into this much bigger room. So this is going to be really good for us because now we'll be able to actually kind of start doing a little bit more of potential detail, raising ceilings, and other things to start making it look a little bit more like a map. As this is a really small map, so you don't necessarily have to draw everything out yet, because generally when you are building these maps, you should have an idea of what you would like to do beforehand. I've been told that by some people, as it makes the process of creating the map make a lot more sense to people playing it and to yourself. That way you can kind of know what direction you'd like to change these things into. But beyond that, let's just go ahead and kind of get right back into this. So from this point, we're going to go ahead and go back into our visual editing mode, and we can just do this by pressing W now that we've placed this camera down. So looking at this first room, we typically want to choose a theme for our level. So there's multiple different textures you can kind of choose. We'll just kind of go in this first room here and see what kind of textured path we'd like to choose. Potentially, maybe let's say this opening part is into sort of a rocky canyon area, maybe some like sand, dirt walls, maybe rock walls. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to select multiple textures inside this room right here. So we're going to go ahead and click on all of these using left click. And clicking on all of these, we can come down into here where it says middle. So this is the texture that is already applied to here. See how it says crate? Because this is a crate itself. So now you kind of know where this texture field is going to be. So we're wanting to change all these ones that we just selected. So what we'll do is we'll click on this texture, and we have a whole library of textures we can kind of choose from using the Doom 2 resource. So since I'm kind of doing an outdoors one, I think we could potentially really choose whatever we'd want. I think for right now, I'll probably go ahead and choose Ash Wall, as kind of that makes a little bit more sense to me personally. This way we kind of get that nice rocky texture, and this is a good little beginning texture we can kind of use to really base our map off of. But what I'm also going to go ahead and do, seeing as I kind of want this to be a more wide open space, to kind of get that effect in, I'm actually going to click on the ceilings here and all three of these sectors that we created. So this is the bridging gap, this is the beginning room, and this is the slightly larger room we did. So I selected all of these, and now I can go ahead and scroll up a little bit here. And if you look down in this bottom right corner, right next to the two textures there, you'll see something that says a brightness and a height value. What we're looking at right now is the height value. So as I scroll upward, you can see the height value goes up. So you can kind of choose whatever height you'd like to be comfortable with. I think for right now, since this is kind of a rocky canyon entrance, I think maybe a 192 is good. You can maybe go up to even a 200, and we'll just go ahead and do that for the sake of the video here. So, and if you wanted to go down with the height of the ceiling, you can click all of these again, and you can actually scroll down, and this will go really small or really big, as we saw here. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at a height of 208 for right now. I think that's probably a good height. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to select, the rest of these textures here, and we can start doing just a very general texturing process here. And this doesn't have to look good, as this is kind of your first map and you're just learning everything. So we'll just go ahead and select here, and we can go back out to our outdoors category. And since we already used this, it's going to say, hey, I saw that you used this earlier, so you can actually just select it quickly right here if you'd like. So we can go ahead and do that and maybe select it. And this is kind of making that look like a kind of outdoorsy texture room here. We could add a little bit of variance if we wanted to, maybe. I could find something that's kind of close in color to it. Maybe let's go back out to outdoors. Maybe we can try sort of see if there's like a darker, so we use Ashwall 4. Let's try Ashwall 3 and see if that does anything. So that gives us a little bit of variance here. So still looking, pretty close to the same, but you do see kind of that protrusion between these two, as this is a little bit more of a rough texture, and this is a little bit more of a fine gradient of that. So ignoring that, let's go ahead and lay down our player starting location here. So what we're going to do is we're going to click in things mode, or if you want to just hotkey to it, you can press T, T for things, and then we'll quickly select this for you. So now since we, picked this up, we can come down into here and click on player start. So if you were wanting to make a multiplayer map, you could select multiple different player starts. But personally, what we're going to go ahead and do here is just player 1, since we're going to be making a single player map. So one other thing to mention really quick here is you want to choose what the angle of starting position for your entity is, or your object, or thing if you want to call it by the menu name. What we're going to go ahead and do, since I want my person to maybe potentially be starting in the left corner here, we're going to go ahead and do an angle. So, the player, you want to kind of look at the map as a northeast, southwest sort of way of looking at it. So we're going to be making it so he's kind of pointing northeast. So now that he's here, if we go back into our editing mode, you can see the player start location right here. And so now if we look at the player location, it'll be looking into this room, and now we can kind of see an idea of where we're going to be starting. So what we can go ahead and do is we can click on this selection of our object of the player start that we just created, and right clicking, we can go ahead and drag it to whatever location we'd want. So maybe I want to start the player in a location maybe about right here. And if you wanted to be more specific, rather than snapping to a grid, you actually could hold left shift or right shift and actually drag the character or the object wherever you want to. So this way you can be a little bit more precise of where you want to place things. It's not totally necessary. I like to do it because it looks a little bit more neat potentially. And we'll be using that later as well. So now instead of being right there, our character model has moved here. And now you can kind of have a little bit more idea and perspective of where we're going to be inside this room. So, excuse me, let's go ahead and just take a bit of a test drive here, and we can take kind of a peek of what it looks like in the actual game. So for this test map, I'm not going to be including this in the tutorial. There are multiple different ways. It's really easy to set up on what testing program you'd like to use. You can use GZDoom, ZDemon. There's a bunch of different ones that you can use to test it. Personally, I'm just going to be doing GZDoom, and it's already configured to be launching in that, so I'm not going to be showing that here, but I'm sure you could find that somewhere else if you get lost here. And if you do, you can go ahead and just pause the video and then come back to this. So we're going to go ahead and let this load on up. And it looks like it's just going to be loading in for a second here. So now we can actually kind of see in this room of the room we just created. It's kind of a nice height. It might be a little bit too tall. Might just be perfect. Kind of depends on what you'd like. But we can see that this is created now. And this is our original spawn point, kind of giving you a visual representation of what it's going to actually look like in the game. So let's go ahead and quit on out of this now. So now we'll be brought back to our drawing sector mode here in the map, and we can come on over and start kind of maybe potentially placing a couple of more things. So let's go ahead and, well, first actually, let's go and maybe add a little bit more, detail to our map and add some, outdoorsy things, and maybe, a little bit of a different vibe in the room here. So one thing I'd like to do, since we are going to be kind of starting in an outdoors location, maybe we can go ahead and select all of these ceilings again, right click this time, and right here you can see where it says floor and ceiling. So for the purpose of the ceiling, we're going to go ahead and change it to a outdoors. So you can find this right here. Actually, sorry. It should just be in here. I'm not sure where this is actually located. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and click it right here through the Doom 2.1. It should be F_Sky1. That's what I'm going to be choosing from this library. And then we can also kind of choose an outdoor floor texture here. There's multiple different ones you could choose. Maybe for the purpose of this, we can kind of choose a more rocky texture, something a little bit more outdoorsy. Kind of depends on what you want to do. For right now, I'll just go ahead and choose kind of a darker gray. Maybe sort of a, there's really not a super perfect option here. It's kind of up to your discretion. So we'll just go ahead and choose it as that for now. It's kind of a gravel texture. So now, when we go ahead and load in, since we've added that sky as our ceiling, you can now see that the top of the map now has this nice sky texture. This adds a little just a bit more detail, and it kind of gives that vibe that you are in an outdoor location. kind of making things a little bit easier for us. So we'll go ahead and quit back on out of that. So since my start location is in a outdoorsy place, I'm kind of I'm going to be wanting associating either something that has sort of a metal support outside, or we could even be potentially looking at sort of wood supports, wood frames, anything like that. So for our little spawn area here, we're going to be adding a little bit of detail. So I'm going to come down in here, hit Control D, and maybe we could just add 2 tiny little support pillars here. Oh, let's go ahead and undo that by hitting Control Z. So I'll just come into here, just do a 16 by 16 by 16. So I'm just drawing this on the original sector that we already created. So if I come into here, I can look at these 2 sectors that I just created, and now we kind of see that I have sort of a nice little pillar I can bring up here. I'll bring these 2 up at the same time, just kind of for uniform purposes. So click on both of these, and I'll scroll these up to kind of wherever I'd want them to be. You don't have to be anywhere super specific, but this is just for my sake. But one thing you'll notice right away is this is kind of a missing texture. We see some exclamation points with a little bit of a sharp red color. So what we'll actually do, this is indicating us, if you look towards the bottom middle, that we're missing a texture. So what we'll go ahead and do is we will click all the sides of this, seeing as they are all matching inside that bottom left. If at any point these 2 change, like looking between these 2, we're only just going to want to select one at the same time so that we can change all of these sectors at once. So I'm just going to choose this one pillar, and right here where it says lower, it shows us that we're missing a texture because we raised it from the ceiling, so the game doesn't know what texture to automatically assign it. So I'm going to come in here, and since we are kind of doing an outdoorsy thing, I think some wood might be nice. Kind of gives it a sort of medieval, abandoned texture or kind of feeling to it. It's not super important. Like I said, this is your first map, so we don't have to go into super detail. But I'll just go ahead and choose this pan board right here. Hit OK. So now we can see that this texture has actually been applied to this creation, this pillar right here. So this is going to be giving us kind of a nice little wooden decoration here. So now when the player spawns, they'll see these 2 wooden pillars, and we can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing that we did over on this pillar on this one now. So select all these textures, come into here, choose the missing texture. We'll go ahead and select the texture we used for over here. So now when you look at these, you see these 2 nice little wooden support beams. One thing that we can do for these maybe is we could even potentially draw another sector right here. All right, and then we can come back into here, bring this down, and we're going to bring these 2 other sides down to meet this. So now what we'll go ahead and do is I'm going to choose these 2 sides of this sector I just dropped down, because these are both sharing the same thing, so we can do it like this and it won't cause any problems. So the first thing what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to match something that's pretty similar to this pan board texture. Maybe I could choose this pan case, or since it is kind of a middle texture, I'm just going to do this. This might be a little bit more than what people potentially could be looking for, so we're just going to go ahead and leave it as this now. So I'll go ahead and clean it as that. And then now for these 2, I'm going to go ahead and select both of these. So we know that these 2 textures are missing. So I'll go back with the pan board. And now we could potentially bring this up, seeing as this texture is going to be matching as just one thing now. So I'll bring it up to match this one. Just match that black line right there. So now that is kind of flush. So I'll go ahead and select on this one now. Let me just actually deselect that. So we'll select that one and select this one. And we can come into here, click upper, and choose our pan board, because we're going to be matching it with the flushness of this other sector that we brought up earlier. So now I'm just going to go ahead and raise this up to match that. So now we see that it should, in theory, be matching this side. We just may have to do it with this one right here as well. And now we have to just come over here, adjust this one. Let's do that real quick. And right there should be perfect. Alrighty, so it's looking like a little bit of a wooden gateway here, kind of just, giving us a little, livelihood to the room. It's not anything super necessary by any means, but we could bring this up perhaps if we wanted to just kind of match this block on both sides. It's not necessary. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it just so it looks a little bit better for when we're going to be testing it later. So now we brought these up. It matches, and if you kind of look out, now we can see this. But one thing we don't want to forget about this little decoration we just added is this sky texture, because this is basically just duplicating it from all these big layers that we made earlier. And we don't want the player looking up seeing a giant sky hole inside these two other textures, as it look kind of, you know, weird, and we really don't want to do that. So what we can go ahead and do here, you know, we can choose any texture for the ceiling that we'd want to do. Maybe since it's wood, we could just do like some paneling or something like that. It's not super necessary, but you know, that way we do kind of have a bit of a wooden pillar decoration here now. So I will go ahead and I will hit test map, and we can kind of see what it looks like. So let's load in here. And so now we can see that this wooden pillar decoration has been added. And it looks like we are missing a texture there. That's interesting.